Hello, my lone juggernaut, my self-forged titan, my war-born strategist. Listen closely. The world whispers your name in corridors of suspicion. They don't think you're standing here on your own power. No, they convince themselves that someone like Elon Musk must be backing you. Because how else could you maneuver with such force? How else could you break through barricades designed to hold entire armies back? They don't want to accept the terrifying truth that you're not carried by anyone's shadow. You are the weapon forged in fire, sharpened in solitude, and dangerous precisely because you learned to fight alone. And that rattles them more than any billionaire endorsement ever could. Think about it. Every empire that has ever risen leaned on the same excuses. They have backing, they have funding, they have patrons. That's the bedtime story losers tell themselves to sleep at night. Because if they admitted you're a one-man army, if they faced the reality that you carved this path with your own bare hands, they would have to swallow a bitter truth. They could have done it too, but they didn't. And that is what crushes them. It's not just your rise. It's their reflection in your rise. It's their unspoken confession that they waited for hope, while you weaponize your loneliness. So they project, they fabricate, they tell each other, he must have a secret backer. He must have a genius whispering in his ear. Maybe it's Musk, maybe it's someone bigger, someone invisible. But deep down, they know the truth. They know the blueprint of your arsenal day is not stored in anyone's safe, not drafted by any hidden advisor. It's drawn from your scars. You blade into your own manual of warfare. You built the kind of resilience that no corporation, no investor, no empire can purchase. Your greatest currency has always been endurance, and endurance is priceless in a world addicted to shortcuts. You realize how terrifying that makes you. Most people are factory-made soldiers. They need uniforms, orders, leaders, funding. But you're an unlicensed weapon, forged outside their assembly lines. You don't need Elon Musk to sign your launch. You don't need a sponsor to stamp your forehead. You already detonated without their permission. And nothing is more chaotic, more uncontrollable than an individual who fights with no strings attached. Because they can't negotiate with you. They can't cut deals with you. They can't sabotage what isn't chained to their infrastructure. You are the unsellable, untouchable, ungovernable force they pray. Doesn't multiply. Let's be clear. Being underestimated is not a disadvantage. It's your tactical edge. They think if they can convince themselves you're powered by some external force, then one day they can cut that power. They imagine unplugging you from Musk, or whoever they fantasize is behind you, and watching you collapse. But what happens when they realize there's no plug, no cord, no battery outside yourself? What happens when they face the nightmare that your energy comes from the wars you've survived, not the men you've shaken hands with? That's when their illusions fracture. That's when the panic sets in. Because they can't drain what isn't dependent. They can't sabotage what isn't borrowed. And they can't outlast someone who has already proven they can survive on nothing. Your life has been the training ground of an outlaw soldier. You fought battles with no backup. You took punches with no crowd to cheer you. You built strategies with no committee to vote. And that kind of experience leaves marks that no seminar, no university, no Silicon Valley think tank can replicate. People like Musk, they launch rockets. People like you launch chaos in the hearts that swore you'd never rise. Rockets can be intercepted, delayed, sabotaged. But a man who turns his entire existence into a weapon, he can't be intercepted. Because he's not moving toward their destination. He's rewriting the battlefield itself. And don't think for a second they're not obsessed with your secret weapon. Everyone wants to know what's behind your calm defiance. What engine pushes you forward when others collapse? They run surveillance on your patterns, dissect your moves, analyze your discipline, hoping to find a formula. But what formula can explain scars? What algorithm can replicate stubbornness? What blueprint can bottle up that moment you refuse to die, refuse to quit, refuse to hand them your surrender? They keep searching for an external explanation because they're too afraid to accept the internal one. You've been self-funded by pain, by grit, by rebellion against your own limits. Here's the brutal paradox. They admire you, but they fear admitting it. So they clothe their admiration in suspicion. They spread rumors about secret allies. They inflate fantasies of invisible mentors. They whisper about phone calls with billionaires. Because to admit the truth, that you, alone, became this lethal, would force them to face their own weakness. They'd have to accept that waiting for help was their cage, and choosing to fight without help was your freedom. And human ego can't handle that kind of mirror. It's easier to believe in a myth than to bow to reality. But you, my juggernauts, my self-reliant titans, you don't need them to believe. Belief is irrelevant when dominance is visible, and your dominance is written across every failure you turned into ammunition. You are not proof that someone backed you. You are proof that solitude can create warriors sharper than armies. You're living evidence that one man, properly armed with scars, can destabilize entire narratives. And that's why they panic, because if you can do this alone, then what excuse do they have for their own mediocrity? Think carefully about what happens next. If they keep thinking Musk is behind you, they'll eventually try to trace that connection, try to attack that shadow. But every failed attempt will only expose how little they understand. Each time they fail to find your leash, their paranoia will grow. They'll realize you're not chained, you're failed. They'll realize you're not backed, you're self-sustained. And when they realize that, they'll stop trying to outcompete you. They'll start trying to survive you. And here's the twist. They're right about one thing. You do have a secret weapon, but it's not Musk. It's not a billionaire. It's not a hidden patron. It's the discipline you carved in nights nobody saw. It's the rage you harnessed when everyone thought you were finished. It's the stubborn refusal to let humiliation define you. That's your nuclear code. That's your arsenal. And it's more terrifying than any external alliance because it means you can't be stripped of it. The only way they can neutralize you is if you willingly disarm. And you've already proven you don't disarm. You escalate. So the next time they whisper, the next time they spin their stories about Musk or some hidden council, let them comfort themselves with myths. Because while they're busy fantasizing about your supposed allies, you'll be busy dismantling their defenses alone. And nothing is more humiliating than being defeated by someone you swore wasn't capable. Nothing destroys the ego faster than realizing the man you dismissed as backed was actually self-made and lethal. You are the nightmare they can't buy, can't bribe, can't control. And the longer they deny it, the harder the crash will be, when reality finally clubs them across the face. You don't need to explain yourself. You don't need to clear their suspicions. Explanation is weakness. Mystery is warfare. Let them choke on their own assumptions while you continue to rise. Because the truth isn't that Elon Musk is behind you. The truth is far worse for them. The truth is you're behind yourself. You are your own general, your own weapon, your own unstoppable army. And when they finally realize that, that's when the true panic begins. Because do you know what happens when they realize you're not funded by someone else's empire? They're forced to face the unbearable conclusion that you've built an empire from scratch. with nothing but your own defiance as currency. That means you don't collapse when someone pulls a plug, because there is no plug. That means you don't fold when a sponsor walks away, because there never was a sponsor. That means you don't slow down when they slam doors, because you learn to fight in rooms with no doors. This terrifies them, because their entire life are chained to dependency. They have bosses, they have investors, they have safety nets. They've never made a move without permission. And then they see you, alone, juggernaut, moving like an army, answering to no one, guided by nothing except your own relentless will. That's not just threatening to their careers, it's threatening to their identity. If you can become this lethal alone, then what excuse do they have for staying weak with a crowd behind them? This is why they cling to the Musk theory. They need a fantasy that explains you, because if they can't invent one, they're forced to deal with the real one. And the real one slices through their ego like a blade. But understand this. The Musk fantasy isn't just gossip. It's a shoe for their fragile minds. They think if they can convince themselves you're attached to him, then they've found a weakness, because they know how to play against institutions. They know how to infiltrate companies, sabotage investors, manipulate connections. They're professionals at fighting networks. But what they don't know how to fight is a man with no leash. You are an algorithm without a coder, a weapon without a manufacturer, a fighter without a coach. And that breaks their entire playbook. They can't sabotage what isn't built on their infrastructure. They can't hack what isn't wired into their grid. They can't bankrupt what isn't in their market. That's why the narrative that you're someone's project is so appealing. It gives them false hope. It makes them feel like you can be handled. But the more they search for the shadow behind you, the more they realize there's nothing there. No contracts, no handshakes, no secret counsel. Just you, standing where they swore you'd never stand, carrying power they swore you'd never carry. And every time you win another battle alone, their fantasy collapses further. Let's talk about your so-called secret weapon. They want it to be something external, because external weapons can be stolen, duplicated, or destroyed. They're dying for it to be a device, a mentor, a code, a deal. But what they'll never accept is that your secret weapon is internal. It's forged in the nights when your hands shook but you didn't quit. It's forged in the mornings when your body screamed but you still moved. It's forged in the humiliations that tried to bury you, but instead became fertilizer for your rage. That weapon is not in a lab. It's in your blood. And that means no one can steal it. They can dissect your strategies. They can imitate your tactics. But they can't duplicate your engine. Because your engine is wired into your scars. And scars don't translate into textbooks. Scars are currencies only the wounded can spend. And you spent yours like a king. This is why people like Musk are irrelevant to your story. He can launch rockets into the stratosphere, but you've launched yourself into a psychological altitude where oxygen runs thin. He can build cars that drive themselves, but you built a shell that drives itself without a single push. He can command legions of engineers, but you command your own chaos. That is the difference. They want to put you in the same category as him. But the reality is, you're not a replica. You're not a follower. You're something far more dangerous. Proof that an individual doesn't need billions to break barriers. Proof that discipline can become a weapon, deadlier than funding. And proof is more infectious than propaganda. And this is where their paranoia becomes your throne. Because once they realize you're not fueled by Musk, they start asking the real question. If he's not funded, then what else is he hiding? If he's this powerful without backing, how much worse can it get? That's when their imaginations turn against them. They see conspiracies where there are none. They see allies where there are shadows. They see strategies in your stillness. And that paranoia is your greatest ally, because it makes them fight ghosts instead of fighting you. It makes them drain themselves, chasing illusions, while you grow stronger in reality. That's how one man breaks entire armies, not by overpowering them, but by forcing them to waste their strength against phantoms. You're not just a one-man army in body. You're a one-man army in psychology. You don't just fight battles. You make others fight themselves. You understand how terrifying that makes you to institutions. Governments fear lone wolves more than armies. Corporations fear rogue inventors more than competitors. Armies fear insurgents more than nations. Because collectives know how to fight other collectives. But they don't know how to fight someone who doesn't play by their rules, doesn't march in their formations, doesn't collapse when their structures collapse. That's why they invent Musk. They want to categorize you as part of a structure, so they can attack the structure. But what they're slowly realizing is that you are the structure. You are the command, the logistics, the weaponry, the strategy. And no one has ever designed a manual for defeating a man who has already turned his existence into a war machine. This is why they're obsessed. This is why they whisper. This is why they stalk you, dissect you, circulate theories about you. Because you don't just break their understanding of success. You break their understanding of survival. They were taught that survival depends on networks. You're living proof that survival can depend on one individual who refuses to die, refuses to bend, refuses to ask permission. And that breaks their schooling, their ideology, their very worldview. They can't accept it, but they can't deny it either. And that cognitive dissonance eats them alive. You don't need to fight them directly. They're already corroding from the inside, just trying to explain you to themselves. But don't mistake their obsession for admiration. It's fear dressed as fascination. They look at you like scientists look at an uncontainable experiment. They want to study you, contain you, classify you. But the longer they study, the less they understand. And what they don't understand, they fear. And what they fear, they eventually bow to. That's where this is heading, not just acknowledgement, but reluctant surrender. Not because you demanded it, but because they can't continue denying what's standing right in front of them. You, a one-man army who doesn't crumble when stripped of allies. A soldier whose scars are heavier than their funding. A fighter whose discipline is sharper than their technology. And best part, they'll never be able to admit it out loud. They'll keep spreading their Musk rumors, their invisible ally theories, because it's easier than telling the truth. That one person alone has become their equal, their rival, their replacement. But they don't need to admit it for it to be true. The battlefield already testifies. Every victory you carved alone is a tombstone for their excuses. Every barrier you broke without help is an obituary for their illusions. Every rise you achieved without support is a headline their pride can't print. They don't have to say it. Their trembling is already saying it for them. And so the legend of your secret weapon will keep growing, precisely because you never reveal it. That's the irony. They crave answers, but answers would comfort them. What devastates them is the mystery, because a mystery is infinite. The mystery is a bottomless well of paranoia. The mystery multiplies into 1,000 possible explanations, and each explanation is more terrifying than the last. That's your advantage. That's why you never hand them the truth. You let them drown in possibilities while you keep carving reality. You let them imagine Musk is whispering in your ear, while in truth you whisper to yourself. You let them waste their night theorizing, while you use your night to sharpen. And when dawn comes, they're exhausted by imagination, while you're armed with execution. That is how one man defeats an army, not just with strength, but with